So hello patrons. So obviously we're not in the parking lot in Tennessee. We're not even in Tennessee, which you probably could look around. So we're in St. Augustine, Florida. You wanna say hey, Hensley?
Hi.
You liking it here? Hensley's doing her thing. Marissa's always doing her, I think she's just always working out. She's so
That's all I do.
But that's part of the thing that we want with you guys that are patrons. We want you to know where we're at in real time, because I mean we want to hang out with you guys if you're around. We want to talk to you. We want you to see things, I guess, just as they happen, more so than YouTube. And that's this video about money. I think we've done like 2 videos about money on YouTube, and we're just like, okay, yeah, we're just gonna start cutting out the YouTube money because the hatred, the just disagreeing and the biting and the terrible comments about, man, you talk about money, politics, religion too much, and it's just people just can't be civil about it. But I know you guys will be. That's part of why we love going in depth about stuff on Patreon, be able to share that with you. So a minimalist view of money. These are kind of like 5 principles over time. A lot of time for me. Like, I was raised to probably not view any of these 5 the way that they're viewed now. But over time, we've been able to go from, this is definitely not like your normal house size, but this is also not your normal backyard. We've gone from what we viewed as normal as having a 2,000, 3,000 square foot house and having multiple cars and larger cars and bigger things and more stuff, to having less stuff, being able to come somewhere like this. The beach is right over here. It's 20 degrees warmer than it was in Tennessee. I mean, it's great. It really is. But it takes a lot. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of mental energy to get there for that. And I guess that's one more caveat too. Like, if these aren't, I mean, these are like things that have worked for us, or things that we believe in, or things that we sort of follow. And these will change over time as we learn and we grow. So if you disagree with any of these, it's A-okay. We can just agree to disagree, or you may have thoughts and comments on things that have worked really well for you. That'd be great to share in the comments too. That's kind of the only thing. I love agree to disagree. I love that saying. So don't feel like I'm definitely not saying we know it all. We feel like we're there on anything. It's always learning and growing as we go along. I'm gonna get that squirrel. There's a squirrel, multiple squirrels, and they're dropping stuff on our Airstream.
That squirrel keeps dropping nuts.
He's dropping nuts on our Airstream, and it's gonna dent that aluminum, isn't it, Hensley? Not cool. Not cool.
Not cool, squirrel.
Not cool, squirrel. Not cool.
Squirrel, that is annoying.
Yeah, squirrel.
That's annoying. That's
Well,
annoying.
it's, speaking of money, it's yeah. Each nut that drops and dents on that Airstream costing me money, squirrel. No, it sounds like that's all we talk about and all we think about. Really, that's the beautiful thing. Like, we obviously need money to survive. We need money to do things. We need stuff to do things. But we don't want it to just consume our mind, to take over our day. And definitely the worst, like if you look at some of the top reasons for divorce and things like that, I mean, financial problems can do that too. We don't want money. We do stress about money sometimes, but we don't want it to just be an everyday, you wake up, you go to sleep, it's just a constant stress and weight on us. I mean, that's a big part of what these things have done for us. So, minimalist view of money. Number 1 is, I'll sound like your grandma probably when I talk about this stuff, but live on less than you make. So, one of my favorite skits on, this is behind the Mike Myers with the chocolate and the playground skit, but one of my favorite skits on SNL, it's pretty awesome. We've tried to just live on less than we make. If we see something we want, we say, well, can we afford that? And if we can't afford it, we don't buy it. It's the way things used to work. There used to not be such a thing as a home mortgage. People, instead of walking up and asking how much a month when you bought a car, you used to ask, well, just how much is the car? And so we buy things with cash. I get distracted super easily. We'll let this go over. St. Augustine's beautiful, by the way. Awesome in the winter. Don't come here in the summer. It's like crazy hot. Like, we came in August and we couldn't step on the beach. It was so hot it burned our feet. And like, it was, but so far in January, awesome. So let me have some, I guess all these aren't like hard super, you know, like with a house. So this will blend into, you know, number 2 on the principles. The first is only buy what you can afford. So you're looking at things and saying, okay, can I actually pay for this in cash? But it kind of transitions into the second principle is only going to debt for things that go up in value. So I know that doesn't totally add up. So we don't totally, it's already a big mess. I've never verbalized these before, I think. But they do make sense for me. So for instance, so a house. So if we're looking at a house, we buy the ugliest house in the neighborhood. We know there's really only one way for that house to go is up in the long term, if the rest of the neighborhood's super nice and all that kind of stuff. That's a purchase to me that, you know, I say, well, can we afford this? And, you know, all that kind of stuff. You know, we might go into debt and do like a 15-year fixed, 30-year fixed on the house or something like that. But where we wouldn't want to go into debt, we wouldn't want to buy something that we couldn't afford, would be, you know, vehicles, for instance. Vehicles are not going to go up in value typically unless you got, I don't know, buy some weird Harley or whatever. But for the most part, so we have bought, so we got this in cash and we got the van in cash, because I try not to tie up the money in things that go down in value typically. And I know some of you, if you do the math, I get it, you can maybe do like 0% financing with a dealer for the first year, or maybe you can get something that's like 5%, and you're like, well, I can make 10% of my money, so it's okay for me to get a 5% loan. But it's getting into that gray area. This is for us, again, this is us personally. If I know it's not gonna go up in value, it's probably a toy. Now I know there's circumstances where maybe you have to have something to get from point A to point B as a job, get you just the cheapest dirt cheap car possible, or use public transportation, or get a ride with somebody in carpool. And either I would do everything possible to not go into debt for things that go down in value. That's just a mental thing that has helped me make those decisions. I know there's other numbers involved, but that's just a principle we tried to go by, is with that. So those two kind of combine together. Don't buy things you can't afford, but if you're gonna buy something you technically can't afford, make sure it goes up in value. Maybe that's the way I kind of clump those two principles. Principle 1, principle 2. Principle 3, early on, and a lot of this, I'll talk about the guy that came up with a lot of these principles we live by, but we just tried to always have $1,000 on hand to start with as emergency fund. We used to always try to have $1,000 on hand as emergency fund, and then that grew into trying to have 3 months of expenses, and now we try to keep 6 months of expenses, especially with this kind of lifestyle where we don't know what could happen with the RV, with things breaking, with the van, with things breaking. We got a lot of stuff that could break and could cost a lot of money. if the transmission went out on the van and we're in the middle of nowhere in an expensive area and all that kind of stuff. So we try to keep 6 months of expenses. And so that's principle number 3, is at least have some sort of emergency fund, an intentional emergency fund. Maybe if you've never had an emergency fund before, if you're paycheck to paycheck every month, I think I would start with $1,000 and then grow that into 3 months of expenses and then 6 months of expenses. Because, man, I mean, just in a perfect world, you wouldn't need an emergency fund, but we don't live in a perfect world. Stuff's gonna go wrong. And then if stuff goes wrong and you don't have the emergency fund, that's when you start making these drastic, hectic decisions. A lot of these principles aren't necessarily, if you go by the numbers, they're not the exact best way to do it, but they're mental principles that help you in the long term, or have helped us in the long term at least, with our money, and not let our money like totally take over our lives. And you may have noticed this is principle number 4. I'm thinking about this one too, and this one's kind of, it is what it is. So I'm a big fan. I think this applies to, like, if you want to get in shape too. I think you just pick a diet, pick a workout plan. I don't think there's anything perfect for any of those, and don't modify it. Just go strictly by that until you make it through the 4-week plan, the 6-month plan, whatever it is. And then you can evaluate and say, hey, this didn't work. What happens if you start making your own modifications? So principle number 4, a lot of these you may have noticed came from a guy named Dave Ramsey. A big fan, huge fan. Hensley loves to talk, my goodness. Hensley, what are you so excited about over there?
She's talking about her treasure box we're gonna make.
Oh, goodness. So, treasure box for when Hensley does really awesome things right, I guess. Is that how it's going to work?
She's excited about it.
All right, well. So, principle number 4, a lot of these came from Dave Ramsey. Save like Ramsey, but invest like Kiyosaki. So, I went through the financial piece with Dave Ramsey. Actually, one of our first dates, we went to, you remember our first, one of our first dates, I took you to that Dave Ramsey conference thing?
The Dave Ramsey conference?
Yeah. Got you pumped? I figured I'd either scare her off and she'd never come back, or we'd go for this thing.
That's one way to do it, I guess.
So I took her to like a Dave Ramsey thing. It was like a 1-day total money makeover, 4-hour, I think, thing or something. But he makes it fun. It was good. So if you're going to start with it, those are cool things to go to. But so Save Like Dave. So I think the principles Dave has as far as establishing emergency fund and saving and getting like maybe some sort of savings in place. I think it's a very good course with Financial Peace or Total Money Makeover as far as a book. I would read that. It's an awesome book. But over time, my mindset has kind of evolved or changed a little bit from that, because I've sort of maybe put these principles in place where I don't make as many emotional decisions with money. So save like Dave, but invest like Kiyosaki. So Robert Kiyosaki wrote a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I read that, and it really changed my thinking on money, changed my thinking on cash flow. And so when we buy things now, as far as investment properties and a lot of our purchases in general, I'm thinking, okay, how does this affect my cash flow? And cash flow, we're talking about, rental property, for instance. With a rental property, the one I just bought, I'm looking at, once we fix this up, is it going to have enough, once you clear the mortgage and the interest and the taxes and all the expenses that go along with that purchase, is that going to produce enough cash so that we have some cash on top of that? And you factor in things that could go wrong and everything too. So when we make those purchases, we're paying attention to cash flow. So Dave Ramsey does not recommend ever buying a rental property except with cash. But to me, this is where the numbers come in, and this is where I've already done the course, and I feel like a little bit more discipline with money over time. Because I would not have done this in the beginning. I didn't do this in the beginning. I strictly followed Financial Peace to make sure I had a grip on that money. But once I did, and I knew that I knew I was good with the numbers, and I knew that I could make 10% plus with the rental properties once you factor in depreciation and all the other numbers on it. Then, since I'm making 10%, if I can get a loan for 4% or 5%, there's that 5% extra that you're making with that. So the numbers, it starts to become more logical with that. So I know I sort of laid the groundwork in all those, and that's why I would start with don't buy things you can't afford. And then over time, you follow one of these programs, and you start to get a grip on your money. It gets a little more complex over time, but you can start to actually use the numbers. A lot of people say there's not good debt or bad debt. There's just debt. Well, I guess technically there is debt. Everything is just debt. But still, like, you're not going to see people that make good money that don't leverage those interest rates, those loans, and things like that. I'm not going to say, obviously there's people that do make money not doing that, like Dave Ramsey, but he's making money because he's selling the advice he's selling. And it's really good advice for people for where they are. But we're just sharing the principles of what we've had as we go along. Hopefully this isn't a big mess. It's this blend of these guys. Save like Ramsey, invest like Kiyosaki. 2 good books. If you read them both, they might like totally confuse you, blow your mind. I don't know. But if you haven't done either, I would start with Ramsey and I would go with his principles. I'm talking like years, like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, maybe 10 years. I probably went strictly with the Dave Ramsey stuff for like 5 plus maybe 10 years before I started trying to look at numbers and feel like I had the emergency fund, I had all my bases covered, and then I kind of slowly gravitated into some of the Kiyosaki stuff. But then the last principle, number 5, is know the value of your time. Growing up, I grew up on a farm. I grew up like, if you want it, I'm going to put my head down, I'm going to get this done. Doesn't matter how long it takes. If somebody's not doing exactly the way I think it should be done, I'm going to do it myself. So over time, a lot of time, and it's nothing. And it's nothing. I want to make sure nothing I'm saying is like. Sometimes you agree to disagree, or you do things different ways. I think if you enjoyed, my dad loves farming. He loves getting his hands dirty. He loves doing the work himself. He loves that. But if you don't love that, and not that I don't love working, it's not the same thing. I love working. I love thinking. I love providing value for people. But I don't want to always be doing that hands-on work myself, because if I'm always doing the hands-on work myself, I can't multiply that impact. If I'm the one that's doing everything, then I can't help as many people. So over time, I've started to see the value of my time and know that the more that I can outsource, the more that I can train, the more that I can think outside of that box, I think this comes into play with money, like on a much earlier level than that. Like with money, things that are on sale, things that are on clearance. 10, 15 years ago, I might have just bought something because it was a deal. I might have just stocked up on something because it was cheaper. But now I've started to see that those things aren't necessarily the deal they look like they are. Free is not free if it takes a lot of my time. A deal is not a deal if I've got to stand in line for an hour to get it. Because and that's principle number 5, is you know the value of your time. So let's say if you know you could make, so maybe the value of your time might be $10 an hour right now. It might be $15 an hour. It might be $20 an hour. Let's say it's $15 an hour. So if the value of your time is $15 an hour, then you make all your decisions based on, okay, how long is this going to take and how does it equal out? So if you can save $10 doing something, but it takes you an hour to do it, like, you didn't really save $10, you lost $5 because you could have made $15 doing something, especially if you're doing work you love. So as your time starts to become, if your time's worth $15 an hour, it's one thing. If it starts to become worth $30 an hour, $60 an hour, $100 an hour, if your time's worth $100 an hour, and some of these guys, Mark Cuban and stuff, where their time's worth $1,000, $2,000 an hour, like they're just popping off these decisions because they're like, yeah, I'm not waiting. they don't want to wait 5 minutes in line for something, because 5 minutes to them, to maybe save $5 on a coffee or whatever what kind of deal it might be, 5 minutes to them, I mean, it's not. So it affects how you make your decisions when you see it, your time as money, and you know the value of your time. And what'll happen over time is, I guess another good example too, like with working with a house. I worked hands-on with a house with a lot of stuff, but in reality, I probably shouldn't have worked on it as much as I did. So if you know the value of your time, let's say your time's worth $30 an hour, but then you can hire someone for $15, $20 an hour to do the same work, do it just as well, sometimes even faster if you're honest about it. It's a no-brainer. You hire people to do that. And that's really hard for me to let go because I want things done a certain way. And so there were certain things I did that I felt like I could do maybe twice as fast as someone as I could hire for $15, $20 an hour. But still, I need to, it's still, that's me. That's me growing up on a farm. That's me wanting to be hands-on. It's very difficult for me to get out of that mindset. I struggle with all these things. I still struggle with the balance between, okay, buy what you can afford, but at the same time, do the numbers and know that if the cash flow is there and it's something you can make money from, and all that kind of stuff. But to me, I guess I'm going to visualize, a couple of situations where maybe, so I think if you want to be on the road, I know some of you guys that are patrons are already on the road and you're already doing this. This may not apply as much, but if you want to be on the road, I think a really good plan to do this, it's a combination of leveraging, getting a loan, but not like being too much of a risk and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think to buy the ugliest house in the neighborhood and then sell it in 2 years plan is I know it's a 2-year plan. That's like forever. Seems like forever. In the meantime, maybe you can scratch the itch and get a small RV and do some small trips and stuff like that. But buy the ugliest house in the neighborhood, spend 2 years fixing it up yourself or bringing in cheap labor, whatever you need to do to get it fixed up. Because what happens after 2 years when you sell that house, you can sell it tax-free. It doesn't count or bump you into a different tax bracket and all that kind of stuff when you sell the house. For sure it's nationwide. I know it's Tennessee. That's a national thing. So anyways, so that to me, that's a good 2-year plan. And in the process as well, if you can also be thinking of things, you can kind of hustle at night. If you can think of other things you can do that maybe start to make your job more mobile and all those kind of steps. So you're always just thinking about that stuff of how you can leverage those things. But I don't know. There's just a lot to... Is that on? Are you filming me? I don't know. You want to do it yourself. I don't know if it's a superhero thing or if it's just how we grew up kind of thing, but that's a big one too. These are all big. These have all had big impacts in my life. I want to share this with you guys. I hope this has a good impact on your life as well. Think outside the box. Think differently about money. A lot of times we go places and we have the ugliest. I'm going to say most of the time we go places, if we go to parties or to somebody's house, or we pull up to any parking lot at a church or something like that. I mean, this is really shined up. Corey did a great job on this. Finding her someday. I filmed it, by the way, so it's actually prettier than usual. But this is an ugly $10,000 cargo van. But we don't care because we have that van, and we don't have a loan on a $30,000, $40,000 car. you know, it's a big part of why we're here. It's the mindset of that, of what we have with it. But that's the way we think. It's a little bit different, but RVing in general is different. And if you can have these different mindsets and, you know, come up with your own principles, build off of these, learn from these, grow from these. I think those are two great books to start with. Total Money Makeover, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You'll kind of get a conflict between those two a little bit, but they're good ones to read. If you got other comments, if you guys like this kind of stuff, let me know. As I do videos, sometimes I have thoughts on, man, I'd like to go deeper on something, but then I can't just sit down and have a 15-minute conversation with you know, YouTube without. It's just the speed and the pace of our YouTube channel is a little bit different than this. So, but I hope that this has been helpful for you guys. We can sit down and have a conversation about this stuff. But looking forward to sharing Florida with you guys. Glad you got to see it here. We've got the Tampa RV show coming up, St. Augustine. We got, what else? We got Orlando. Got some stuff in Orlando, Jacksonville. I don't know. Got all kinds of different places. Some pretty good stuff going on.
Whatever we can get in and our time frame.
Yep. We got about 6 weeks, so that's pretty fast for us. We're used to 6 months with Alaska. Usually about 3 months is what we usually have. But we're gonna get back. This is beautiful, but we want to have the baby in Tennessee. So, all right. It's my money talk, babe. Patrons only. I know, that's why we did it for patrons. They let me have it every time on YouTube when I start talking about money, because everybody views things differently. They grew up in a different way. They feel very strongly about how they grew up or what they have, and same thing, politics, religion, and so.
I think we both grew up very differently than how we view money now.
Yeah.
So it can actually push you in a different direction too, and I don't think that I would view money the way I do if it wasn't for you. And I was not a fan in the beginning because it felt like you were telling me what to do with money, and I had to learn that the budget tells me.
Yeah,
what
we had
to
to
do
the
with
budget
money.
was not fun.
And that's really
it's hard.
hard.
It's a slow cooker. Everything I've talked about is like a slow cooker because it's hard because you're watching other people with bigger houses, nicer cars, nicer stuff. But because we did the slow cooker recipe, oh no, there goes your track. We'll fix it. Hey,
No,
calm down. We'll fix it. We'll fix it. Real life here, real life. But because we had that slow cooker recipe, everybody else is still buying the nicer cars, the bigger houses, but they don't get to go anywhere. They don't have a lot of time. They don't have a lot of freedom. They don't have a lot of free time.
That was just the decision we made.
It was, and I still hope that the cool thing is if you have the slow cooker recipe and you're providing value over time, we can do this and we can have savings, you know, like we showed with the rent house and stuff like that. So we can still have financial freedom and freedom with our time, both, by doing that.
Win-win.
So it is, but it's some work. It's not easy.
Lots of sacrifice,
Yeah.
but totally worth it.
Totally worth it. But hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope it's been helpful. Just like we're gonna talk type thing. But that's the 5 principles we've kind of incorporated. They'll change over time, but hopefully it's been good for you. If you got comments, thoughts, let us know. Till next time, we will catch you guys later.